All right, y'all. So we're back. What I noticed, and forgive me, because I did not actually read through all of this first part, which I should have done. I need to be more thorough. But this is in reference to ships dispatched from several ports of Great Britain and the plantations to the coast of Africa. Because obviously there was trading back and forth for a time with the woolen goods and the Negroes. But this still sheds a lot of light, and I did kind of mention that one of the key points that I pulled away from the information on the back, that it doesn't necessarily account for those shipped to, or I guess I could say, or from Africa. But which is also interesting to think about. So if a lot of those Negroes, right, unlike the native Africans that were shipped to parts of Europe and the Americas, were at a time traded back or taken back in exchange for goods or money. That's interesting. I wonder how many of those few thousand brought over to North America actually got traded back to Africa. And what happened to them? Were they then enslaved on the continent? Were they unalived? Like, what happened to them? If that happened, yo, this is crazy. This is, to me, this is very crazy and interesting to me. And how often was that going on? And so then it poses the question of, like, well, how many of them actually stayed for a few centuries here, eventually intermingling with the natives and, Europeans here. But yeah, so this is very eye opening. It really, really is. Um, Wild stuff. But let's see what other sources are out there. I haven't even read through all of this. Um, haven't even read through all of this. Very interesting stuff. Let's see, what else did I have pulled up? Oh yeah, this was the African companies later on. So I think this was earlier in the 17th. Yeah, so this is a few decades later. Still going strong, huh? Now they're getting to more of the Americas, the voyage in Georgia. First time seeing this source, so we're going through this together. And an account of the settling of the town of Frederica in the southern part of the province, and a description of the soil, air, birds, beasts, trees, rivers, and islands. Okay. True. The trustees for establishing the colony of Georgia in America ordered a new town to be built in that colony and an embarkation to be made for the purpose. They were pleased to anoint me to be the keeper of the stores. The following rules were given for the embarkation. Okay, interesting. So this is what they gave to everyone. A frying pan. I don't know why that's funny. A watch, coat, a musket and bayonet. All right, they suited and booted. They've been doing this for a long time, and we see that with a lot that's happening with those who've immigrated over here. They get the wares, man. The wares and tears, the nice stuff on their way in. Set them up real nice, like. All right. Lots of food. Wow. Okay. I mean, somebody's spinning the cotton. Somebody's putting this stuff together. Interesting. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Let's see. I might have to start searching some terms in here, y'all. If we don't come across nothing juicy now. Let's see. No, this is super interesting. I'm going to have to read through all of this. And yeah, I mean, this is around the time when, I mean, this is after Linnaeus. This is after, maybe even after Bartram. I mean, this is after a lot of folk who had already come over to bioprospect and pyrate, in a sense. Lots of stuff's already. English and foreigners together with the millionaires to the Indians. Interesting. Huh. Let's see. Okay, here we go. What is it saying? Should be urban. Service each laws, customs peculiar to Georgia when it that all brandies and distilled liquors are prohibited under penalties. Another is that no slavery is allowed on Negroes. Third is persons who go among the Indians must give security for their good behavior because the Indians, the injury is done to them, they cannot kill the man who does it. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Okay. Huh. Let's see. Sorry, y'all. I'm just looking. I mean, y'all are seeing what I'm seeing. We're just looking through the different instances where Negroes appears. Okay. Party of Indians. I mean, hey, at least I can give kudos to the fact that they include a lot of the terminology or acknowledgement of the Indians or the indigenous, which again, many of them were also black people. And I got to pull up a lot of those resources that speak to the distinctions between the different kinds of natives on the land. And in a lot of these texts, I mean, they're using this term, which isn't really the best term to describe these people. And they're not making, distinctions or being very particular. But we see them mentioned along with the Negroes. Goes there. Inhabitants of South Carolina. Wow. That's where some of my people from. Okay. 1735. Is this okay? Savannah. Okay. Yeah, that's how they did it. Chattel slave. I mean, we were considered cattle too, basically. Horses, cattle, Negroes out of Georgia. Wow. Let's see further along what we got here. Getting a plantation in Savannah. Yeah. So it is also interesting too that when coming across the Atlantic to the Americas, especially North America, a lot of these records, when they're referring to the Africans, none of them are referred to in a lot of what I've seen. Okay. There's still so many that I haven't, but a lot of these from like the 15 through to the early even early 1800s that I've seen do not use the term African to refer to the people. They use Negroes, they use Native, Indian, Aborigine. And so to me that's interesting because again, there's been some sort of delineation or distinction made, especially on paper. And I mean, these people are very thorough and meticulous, okay, about what they're transcribing. And so you just got to wonder, like, even in a document where both terms are being used and specificities within that, you got to wonder, like, what's the difference between a Negro and an African? And is there one? Because they would have us believe that all black people, no matter where you come from, are Negro, or all Africans are Negro, you know? And some texts that I've read do um, make that connection deliberately, that the Negro is indicative of those coming from the continent of Africa, especially when they're talking about the appearances and the differences between the natives of certain parts of North America. So to me, it's just really interesting that that is what it is. So yeah, wanted to kind of delve into that. Where'd it go? That resource. Let me see. Let me see if it's in here. Let's search. Let's see. All right, let's see. Once in all 110 pages is there mention of African, and that is describing the company involved in the trade, not people. They say Indian, they say Spaniards, that, you know, it's like, why would you not say African? Because if the logic or reality, and then maybe it is, you know, the effort to strip them of their identity, but it's like African itself is not a good descriptor, especially during that time, because the cultural groups that existed were very distinct and they had names for those people. So you could call them Igbo or, you know, whatever. So even to say African would be performing the same function, essentially, is what I'm saying, as calling them Negro. But again, as we see, not in this text in particular, but for certain in these other records, which are within the same century, there has been employment and use of the term African or Africa, but in reference to the natives of the continent. So still not necessarily like African describing people, but natives of Africa. You know? I could be reaching, but I'm just saying things that make you go, hmm. And then this is from an earlier time, the late 1600s, from the African Company Still of England. And I don't know what this is, just some sort of note or letter. Just some sort of note or letter. That's interesting. What I also like too about this Internet Archive resource is when you scroll down, you can find like similar items. So I don't know how they're like sorting the search or the algorithm for parsing out like what keywords or key documents would align with what's shown or selected, but it's nice to know that you can find key documents, though. None of those really interest me. All right, so this is kind of similar. Inviting all His Majesty's native subjects. Huh. Interesting. Okay. That one is not loading for some reason. A journal of the transactions and occurrences in the settlement of Massachusetts and other New England colonies from the year 1630 to 1644. Interesting. Let's see. There's only one here. Let's see if we can zoom in. Huh. No African here. Let's see if they lots of mentions of Indian. Okay. Indian corn. Oh, excuse me, y'all. It's getting late. All right. We'll delve into that a little more. Okay. Definitely wanted to read that. Yeah, definitely wanted to read this too. 1626. An encouragement to the colonies. My. Gotta encourage these folks to continue on in their wickedness. Lord. Alright, I'm not going to keep this video going for too much longer. I'm going to read through a few more of these. Y'all see the time. Okay. But yeah. Thought that was interesting, y'all. Again, the things that make you go,